Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun!
The scarlet dress hung in the closet, a beacon of both excitement and trepidation. Mark's fingers trembled as they brushed against the silky fabric. He'd bought it weeks ago, but hadn't worked up the courage to try it on, let alone wear it outside. Taking a deep breath, he slipped the dress off its hanger. The material whispered against his skin as he pulled it over his head, adjusting the straps on his shoulders. His heart raced as he turned to face the full-length mirror. The reflection staring back at him was both familiar and foreign. The dress hugged his curves in a way that felt surprisingly natural. He smoothed his hands over his hips, marveling at how different his silhouette looked. "Okay, Mark," he muttered to himself. "You can do this." He reached for the makeup bag on his dresser, hands shaking slightly as he applied foundation, blush, and mascara. The techniques he'd practiced in secret over the past few months came back to him, muscle memory taking over. As he put the finishing touches on his lips, a bold red to match the dress, Mark heard his phone chime. A text from his friend Sarah lit up the screen. "Still on for coffee? Can't wait to see the new you." Mark's stomach fluttered with nerves. Sarah was the only person who knew about his desire to explore his gender expression. Her unwavering support had given him the confidence to take this step. "On my way," he typed back before slipping on a pair of low heels and grabbing his purse. The walk to the cafe felt like stepping onto a stage. Every passing car, every pedestrian on the sidewalk seemed to be staring. Mark forced himself to keep his chin up, reminding himself that confidence was key. As he approached the cafe, he spotted Sarah waving enthusiastically from an outdoor table. Her wide smile helped ease some of his anxiety. "Oh my God, look at you!" Sarah exclaimed as Mark sat down. "You look absolutely gorgeous!" Mark felt his cheeks flush. "Thanks," he said softly. "I wasn't sure if I could actually go through with it." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm so proud of you. How does it feel?" Mark paused, considering the question. "Scary," he admitted. "But also, right? Like I'm finally letting out a part of myself I've kept hidden for so long." Their conversation flowed easily as they sipped their coffees. Mark found himself relaxing, almost forgetting about his appearance as he and Sarah caught up on each other's lives. As they were finishing up, Sarah's expression grew serious. "Have you thought about attending one of those support groups I mentioned? It might help to talk to others who are on similar journeys." Mark nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about it. Maybe it's time to take that step too." The following week, Mark found himself standing outside a community center, staring at a flyer for a gender identity support group. His palms were sweaty as he pushed open the door and made his way to the meeting room. Inside, a circle of chairs was already occupied by about a dozen people of various ages and presentations. A kind-faced facilitator greeted Mark warmly. "Welcome, I'm Jess. Why don't you grab a chair and join us?" Mark settled into an empty seat, his eyes darting nervously around the circle. Some of the faces looked as apprehensive as he felt, while others exuded a quiet confidence. "Let's start with introductions," Jess suggested. "Share your name, pronouns if you're comfortable, and what brought you here today." As the introductions made their way around the circle, Mark felt a growing sense of belonging. Each story resonated with some part of his own experience, the confusion, the fear, the tentative steps towards self-discovery. When it was his turn, Mark took a deep breath. "I'm Mark. He, him for now, I think. I've been experimenting with presenting as female, but I'm not sure if I want to fully transition. I guess I'm here to figure things out." Nods of understanding rippled through the group. A person across the circle, Alex they'd introduced themselves as, spoke up. I remember feeling that way too. It took me a long time to realize that gender isn't always a binary choice. You don't have to pick one or the other if that doesn't feel right for you. Their words struck a chord with Mark. He'd been so focused on the idea of man versus woman that he hadn't considered there might be a middle ground. As the meeting progressed, Mark found himself opening up more. He shared his fears about how his family might react, his uncertainty about his place in the world. With each story he told, a weight seemed to lift from his shoulders. After the meeting, Alex approached Mark.
Hey, a bunch of us usually grab dinner after these meetings. Want to join?
Mark hesitated only briefly before nodding.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Over plates of pizza, Mark listened to the others discuss their experiences. Some had fully transitioned, others were in various stages of the process, and some, like Alex, had found comfort in a more fluid gender expression. It's all about what feels authentic to you, Alex explained between bites. For me, that means sometimes presenting more masculine, sometimes more feminine, and often somewhere in between. As Mark walked home that night, his mind was buzzing with new possibilities. The idea that he didn't have to choose just one way of expressing himself was both liberating and slightly overwhelming. Over the next few months, Mark continued to explore. Some days he wore dresses and makeup, reveling in the freedom of feminine expression. Other days, he felt most comfortable in his usual jeans and t-shirts. And increasingly, he found himself mixing elements of both, creating a style that was uniquely his own. He became a regular at the support group, finding strength and inspiration in the community he'd discovered. With each meeting, each conversation, he grew more confident in his evolving identity. One afternoon, as Mark was getting ready for a day out, he caught his reflection in the mirror. He was wearing a flowy blouse paired with men's trousers, his face adorned with subtle makeup. The person staring back at him looked happy, comfortable in their own skin. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Brunch? I want to hear all about your journey." Mark smiled, typing back a quick, "On my way," before grabbing his keys and heading out the door. The sun was warm on his face as he walked to their favorite cafe. He noticed a few curious glances from passers-by, but they no longer filled him with anxiety. Instead, he held his head high, proud of the person he was becoming. Sarah was already seated when he arrived, her face lighting up as she saw him. "Look at you!" she exclaimed. "You're glowing!" Mark slid into the seat across from her, a contented smile on his face. "I feel good," he admitted. "Really good." As they placed their orders, Sarah leaned forward eagerly. "So, tell me everything. How's the support group? Have you made any decisions about transitioning?" Mark took a sip of water, gathering his thoughts. "The group has been amazing," he began.
It's opened my eyes to so many possibilities I hadn't considered before.
He paused as the waiter brought their food, waiting until they were alone again, before continuing.
As for transitioning, I've realized that's not the path for me, at least not in the way I originally thought.
Sarah's brow furrowed slightly.
Oh? What do you mean?
Mark gestured to his outfit.
I've discovered that I feel comfortable in both male and female presentations. Some days I want to wear a dress and heels, other days I'm happiest in my old clothes, and a lot of the time, I like to mix it up.
He took a bite of his omelet, chewing thoughtfully.
I don't feel the need to physically transition or to pick one gender expression over the other. I'm happiest when I can embrace both aspects of myself.
Sarah reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "That's wonderful, Mark. I'm so happy you found what feels right for you." As they continued their meal, Mark shared stories from the support group, the friends he'd made, and the journey of self-discovery he'd been on. Sarah listened intently, her eyes shining with pride for her friend.
You know,
she said as they were finishing up,
I was a little worried when you first told me about
wanting to explore your gender. Not because I didn't support you, but because I was afraid of how hard it might be. Mark nodded, understanding. It hasn't always been easy, he admitted. There have been plenty of moments of doubt and fear,
but I wouldn't trade this journey for anything.
As they left the cafe, Sarah linked her arm through Mark's. So, what's next for you? Any big plans? Mark laughed, shaking his head. Nothing earth-shattering. Just continuing to be myself, in whatever form that takes each day. Although, he trailed off, a mischievous glint in his eye. Although what? Sarah prompted, nudging him playfully. I've been thinking about starting a blog, Mark confessed. Sharing my experiences, maybe helping others who are on similar journeys. Sarah's face lit up.
That's a brilliant idea! You could make such a difference for people who are questioning their own identities.
As they walked down the sun-dappled streets, Mark felt a surge of excitement for the future. He didn't know exactly what it would hold, but for the first time in his life, he felt truly comfortable in his own skin. You know, he mused, a year ago, I never could have imagined being here. I was so caught up in trying to fit into one box or another. Sarah squeezed his arm affectionately.
And now?
Mark grinned, gesturing to his eclectic outfit. Now I'm building my own box, one that's big enough for all the different parts of me. As they reached the corner where they would part ways, Sarah pulled Mark into a tight hug. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. Mark returned the embrace, feeling a wave of gratitude for his friend's unwavering support. Thanks for being there through all of this, he said as they pulled apart. Sarah waved off his thanks with a smile. That's what friends are for! Now go start planning that blog! As Mark walked home, his mind was already buzzing with ideas. He thought about all the people out there who might be struggling with the same questions he had faced. If his story could help even one person feel less alone, it would be worth sharing. He climbed the stairs to his apartment, unlocking the door and stepping inside. His gaze fell on the full-length mirror in the hallway, and he paused, really looking at his reflection. Mark stood before the mirror, taking in his reflection with a newfound clarity. The journey of self-discovery he'd embarked on over the past months had led him to an unexpected destination. As he gazed at his image, the blend of masculine and feminine elements in his appearance, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. I don't need to transition, he murmured to himself, the realization settling in his chest like a warm embrace. This is who I am. The weight of expectation he'd been carrying, the idea that exploring his gender identity meant he had to fully transition, lifted from his shoulders. Mark realized that what truly made him happy was the freedom to express himself through clothing and appearance, without needing to alter his body or identity. He ran his fingers through his hair, thinking back to the conversations he'd had in the support group. The diverse experiences shared by others had opened his eyes to the many ways one could express their gender. For some, transition was a crucial part of their journey. But for Mark, the ability to cross-dress and play with his presentation was enough. With a small smile, he turned away from the mirror and walked to his closet. He ran his hands over the various items hanging there. Dresses next to suits, skirts alongside jeans. Each piece represented a facet of his personality, a mood, a way of expressing himself to the world. Mark pulled out a flowing skirt and paired it with a crisp button-down shirt. As he dressed, he felt a thrill of excitement. This was what felt right to him. The freedom to mix and match, to present himself however he felt on any given day. He sat down at his computer, opening a new document. The idea for the blog he'd mentioned to Sarah was taking shape in his mind. He began to type, the words flowing easily. My journey began with confusion and a search for identity. It's led me to a place of self-acceptance and joy in self-expression.
I've realized that for me, transitioning isn't the goal. My happiness comes from the freedom to cross-dress, to play with gender norms, and to be myself in all my complexity. As he wrote, Mark reflected on the path that had brought him to this point.
He thought about the first time he'd tried on a dress, the nervous excitement of venturing out in public presenting as female, the revelations he'd experienced in the support group. He remembered the day he'd realized that he didn't always want to present as female, that some days he felt most comfortable in traditionally masculine clothing. It had been confusing at first, making him question whether his desire to cross-dress was just a phase or a mistake. But as he continued to explore, Mark had come to understand that his gender expression didn't have to be all or nothing. He could embrace both masculine and feminine aspects of himself without needing to choose one over the other permanently. He continued typing, pouring his experiences and insights into the blog post. Cross-dressing isn't about pretending to be someone else. For me, it's about expressing different facets of who I am. Some days that means wearing a dress and heels, other days it's jeans and a t-shirt. And often, it's a mix of both. This fluidity in my presentation feels authentic and freeing. Mark paused, considering how to explain the difference between his experience and that of someone who chooses to transition. He wanted to be clear and respectful, acknowledging that everyone's journey is unique. It's important to note that my experience is just that, mine. For many people, transitioning is a crucial and life-affirming step. My decision not to transition doesn't invalidate or diminish the experiences of those who do. We're all on our own paths to self-discovery and authenticity. As he wrote, Mark felt a growing sense of purpose. He hoped that by sharing his story, he might help others who were questioning their own gender identity or expression. Perhaps someone out there was feeling the same confusion he had once felt, thinking that exploring their gender meant they had to commit to a full transition. He thought about the young person he'd met at the last support group meeting, a teenager named Jamie who had expressed uncertainty about their identity. Mark wondered if Jamie might find comfort in knowing that there were many ways to express gender, that it didn't have to be an all-or-nothing decision. With that in mind, he continued writing. If you're questioning your gender identity or expression, know that there's no one right way to be. You don't have to fit into predefined categories. It's okay to explore, to try different ways of presenting yourself to the world. What matters most is finding what feels authentic and comfortable for you. Mark leaned back in his chair, rereading what he'd written. It felt good to put his experiences into words, to articulate the journey he'd been on. He hoped that by sharing his story, he might provide a different perspective on gender expression, one that embraced fluidity and rejected rigid categorizations. He thought about the reactions he might get to his blog. Undoubtedly, there would be some who wouldn't understand or who might criticize his choices. But he also knew there would be others who would find comfort and validation in his words. With a deep breath, Mark hit publish on his first blog post. He felt a mix of nervousness and excitement as he watched it go live. This was a new chapter in his journey, not just exploring his own identity, but potentially helping others on their paths as well. As he closed his laptop, Mark's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Hey, how's the blog coming along? Can't wait to read it." Mark smiled, typing back a quick response. "Just published my first post. It's about realizing that cross-dressing is what feels right for me, rather than transitioning. I'm a bit nervous about putting it out there, but it feels good to share my story." Sarah's reply came almost immediately. "That's amazing, Mark.
I'm so proud of you. Sending you a big virtual hug. Want to meet up later to celebrate? Mark felt a wave of gratitude for his friend's unwavering support. He agreed to meet Sarah for dinner, looking forward to discussing his realizations and the blog with her in person. As he got ready to head out, Mark stood once more in front of the mirror. He adjusted his skirt, smoothing out a wrinkle, and straightened his shirt collar. The person looking back at him was neither fully masculine nor fully feminine, but a unique blend of both. And for the first time in a long while, Mark felt completely at peace with his reflection. He grabbed his keys and headed out the door, ready to embrace whatever the evening might bring. As he walked down the street, he noticed a few curious glances from passers-by, but they no longer bothered him. He held his head high, confident in who he was and how he chose to express himself. The restaurant where he was meeting Sarah was a cozy little bistro they both loved. As he approached, he saw Sarah already seated at an outdoor table, waving enthusiastically. Her face lit up as she took in his outfit. "Look at you!" she exclaimed as Mark sat down. "You look fantastic! How does it feel?" Mark grinned, settling into his chair. "It feels right," he said simply, "like I'm finally comfortable in my own skin." As they perused the menu, Sarah leaned forward eagerly. "So, tell me more about this realization you've had. You mentioned in your text that you've decided transitioning isn't for you?" Mark nodded, taking a sip of water. "Yeah, it's been a gradual understanding. At first I thought exploring my gender meant I had to transition fully, but as I've experimented with different ways of presenting myself, I've realized that what makes me happiest is the freedom to cross-dress and play with my gender expression without needing to commit to one fixed identity." Sarah listened intently, her expression thoughtful. "That makes a lot of sense," she said. "I can see how much more relaxed and confident you seem compared to when you first started this journey." Their conversation was briefly interrupted as the waiter came to take their orders. Once they were alone again, Sarah asked, "So, what does this mean for you going forward? Will you still be attending the support group?" Mark considered the question as he buttered a piece of bread.
"I think so,"
he said slowly. "The group has been incredibly helpful, and I've made some good friends there. Plus, I think it's important to have a diversity of experiences represented. My journey might be different from others, but it's still valid and might be helpful for people to hear about." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Absolutely. I'm sure there are others out there who might be feeling the same way you did, thinking they have to choose one fixed gender identity." As their meals arrived, the conversation shifted to Mark's newly launched blog. He shared some of the key points he'd written about, and Sarah offered encouragement and suggestions for future topics. "You know," she said between bites of her pasta, "I think what you're doing is really important. There's still so much misunderstanding about gender identity and expression. By sharing your experience, you're helping to broaden people's perspectives." Mark felt a warmth in his chest at his friend's words. "I hope so," he said. "If I can help even one person feel less alone or confused, it'll be worth it." As they finished their meal, Sarah raised her glass in a toast. "To authenticity," she said with a smile, "and to having the courage to be true to yourself, whatever that looks like." Mark clinked his glass against hers, feeling a surge of gratitude for her unwavering support throughout his journey.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!